Hello, everybody. Welcome to this afternoon's session. So it is the International Development and Humanitarian Careers event. So today, as I said, we're very lucky to have a great number of panelists. It's proven to be a very popular event, this one today. So I hope you get lots out of it. I want to thank Emma Ruth in Alumni for helping source such great speakers today as well. So for the outline for today, I'll shortly be handing over to Jane Cocking as our keynote speaker. And Jane will give you an overview of what the current climate landscape, if you like, looks like. And then after sort of 10 minutes, we will move on to the panelists. They'll be given 2 minutes each to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves. After that, I will allocate you all into breakout rooms. So you will have 15 minutes with panelists. Please put your mics on mute. You will have 15 minutes with the panelists, and then the panelists will move room from room. So you don't need to do anything, but you will see on your screen that you'll be invited to join a breakout room. So don't click on that straight away. Wait until we tell you to join that group. And then once you're in that breakout room, please stay in the room. The panelists will go around. We're lucky to have 10 today, so they will go around from room to room. At this stage, it's up to you. You can leave your camera off and your mic off while we're listening to the keynote and the panelists. In the rooms, we'd actively encourage you to keep those on just so you can connect with one another, ask your questions as well. The breakout rooms themselves will not be recorded, and at the end of the breakout rooms, you will be given time to come back to the main room where we'll just summarize everything for today. The panelists, as they move room from room, will have a 30-second warning. So you will see that 30-second warning pop up on your screens, which is a reminder just to wrap up your conversation. So that's it for now. I really hope you get most out of this. As I would say, be curious, ask those key questions, make connections so that you can have the conversations on LinkedIn as well. And so again, thank you all for attending. And I will now pass on to Jane for the keynote.
So good afternoon, everybody, again. And my name's Jane Cocking, and I've been privileged to be part of the humanitarian sector for 30 years, working for various organisations, especially Save the Children, Oxfam and MAG, who of course are just down the road. I now work as a freelance humanitarian. So I am speaking now entirely on behalf of myself, and I will certainly use that to express new views to perhaps get the conversation going a bit. So what I'd like to do just in the next 10 minutes is ask whether or not we actually live in a humanitarian world. Because I assume that as you're at this event this afternoon, you, like me, have a commitment to humanitarianism, to equality, to equity, and to the strong development, empowering and enabling agenda across the world. And what I'd just like to say is quite often in these conversations, it's very easy to slip into everything that's wrong. But just to make sure that we don't do that too much, I'd just like to say that in joining this and in being part of this conversation, you are joining a conversation which is one of the most fantastic and wonderful ones there is. Every day, hundreds of thousands of people do things with and for their fellow human beings for no reason other than that we share that common humanity. And that is an extraordinary thing, and we must never let go of it. So I'm just going to talk a little bit now about whether or not we live in a humanitarian world. So when something happens like this picture shows you, which is the devastation caused by an earthquake, do you actually have a right to assistance? Or is it a privilege? Is it something that may happen or not? I hope, like me, you believe passionately that it should be a right. It should not be something that maybe if you're standing in the right place on the planet, you get it. But actually, the answer to that question is, well, yes and no. Because we all talk about international humanitarian law, and I'm sure there are various lawyers in the Zoom room as we are, but it does, all the elements of international humanitarian law, which entire PhDs and books have been written about, do form the basis for people affected by crises to access the help and the protection they need. And it also forms basis for people who want to offer assistance and protection to do that. But it is not anywhere near as strong as you might think. It's very much a set of legal instruments which embody the moral spirit of humanitarianism, but they are absolutely subject to the overriding thread running through the law of the rights of sovereignty of the state and the importance of consent. So whether or not you actually receive humanitarian assistance when you need it is not overridden by international humanitarian law. It is very much at the will and the capacity of the government of the state in which you find yourself. And that is a really fundamental point, and something that we all find ourselves wrestling with in the humanitarian sector on a daily basis, because it's subject to whether or not the state where you are has the capacity to offer assistance. And sometimes, and very, very frequently, it is whether or not the state chooses to offer it to you, or whether or not, for whatever reason, through ethnicity, through politics, through orientation, whatever, whether or not you are marginalized as a result of it. And that is one of the most fundamental things that we constantly struggle with. And increasingly, that debate is referred to as the debate of counter-humanitarianism. So I don't think it can be expressed. I wrestled with how to express this. I don't think it can be said any better than Christina Bennett, who at the time was at the Overseas Development Institute, said it in 2019, which is essentially that it has always been the case that there have been so many factors which have mitigated against people receiving assistance. What is different now is that that counter-humanitarianism, if you like, is now being rationalized, pursued as a doctrine, and practiced not only by states and governments who might be regularly labeled as the rogues of the international world, but established, respected governments. And from my own point of view, and I'm happy to talk about that, that includes our own in the United Kingdom at the moment. Not only the reduction in the legal commitment to offering 0.7% of GDP as overseas development assistance, but when you look at how it's being done, when we have an aid strategy which is called in the national interest, that gives you a pretty clear idea of how decisions are going to be made. And it is not with people living in poverty at their heart. And that, I think, is a critical thing that we should be challenging. So that's my political soapbox for now. Happy to talk about that later. But stepping back and looking at a global level at what actually happens in terms of the amount of humanitarian assistance that's delivered on a global basis. So what actually happens? Now, apologies that some of these years are different. So in a way, we're kind of not totally comparing like with like, but we're looking at trends. But the numbers available vary in the time they become available. So these numbers essentially come from the Office for the Coordinator of Humanitarian Affairs, which is the UN agency responsible for humanitarian coordination. And they are generally taken as a good starting point. So here you have it. In 2020, 168 million people found themselves unable to cope and in need of some level of outside assistance. And I think we all agree that none of us would ever want to find ourselves in that situation. And so it is deeply, profoundly moving that that has happened to so many people. What is even more shocking is that this year, and this number has only recently been released, but that number has grown from last year's 168 million by 40%. 235 million people find themselves
测完，我刚到酒店，然后明天早上7:20就要发车，就去机场，然后上午10点钟到北京了。
Please, can you keep your mic on mute? Thank you.
Sorry. Okay, so that number has gone up by 40% this year, and that is COVID on a global scale. And we can talk about it endlessly, but it is fundamentally because for the majority of people across the world, COVID is not only a health crisis, it is a profound economic one, and one which is taking people to the brink of actually managing to see themselves through today and tomorrow. And I think when we talk about our own challenges, it's always worth remembering that. In 2019, which is the last year that there is a clear figure for, 29.6 billion, sorry, that should be a B, not an M, was committed in international humanitarian assistance. And that was already a downward trend. It is likely to go down even more this year. So we have need rocketing and we have availability of assistance coming down. That is one of our profound challenges. It's also not evenly committed to. 4 donors alone accounted for 70% of funds. And again, to give the government in this country credit, certainly up until this year, and we simply don't know about this year, the UK was one of those top 4. So the top 4 are the US, Germany, the UK, and EU institutions. But how much assistance you receive and whether or not you can choose, you have your fundamental rights to dignity and choice respected in the provision of that assistance very much depends on where you are. So for example, 20% of assistance last year went to Yemen alone. Now that was, every cent of that was desperately needed. There is no question of that. This is not an argument to say take money away from Yemen. It's an argument to say more is needed. And that is a very important point. And the final point I really want to make when it comes to numbers, because this is where we then transfer into the quality of assistance, of all of that money, only 2.1% went directly to local NGOs who are closest to people who are affected by humanitarian crises, who are there first, and who, whenever you talk to people, whether they've been affected by conflict, by flood, by earthquake, and you say, who helped you most? It was their neighbours, it was their local organisations who were there and who understood and who were there for them and with them. And in 2016, the humanitarian community internationally made a commitment that in 5 years, that number, which is still 2.1%, would be 25%. We have a great deal further to go, and there is an awful lot underneath which really deserves further exploration. There are positives, though. The humanitarian sector reviews itself pretty stringently every 5 years through something called the State of the Humanitarian System. And what we have learned is that the relevance of what people are offered and choose to take is improving. So assistance is being tailored much more to what people are asking for. And levels of accountability to people affected by crises are also improving. We have a long way to go, but they are getting better. And those add up to increased efficiency. But we have some major challenges, and the primary one is access. The geopolitical shift that we are seeing going on in the world, and where I started by saying, if you are affected by a crisis, do you have the right to stand up and say, I would like assistance, and this is what I need, and this is who I want it from? That is still absolutely fundamental. And the balance of resources amongst the big international agencies and the often smaller local and national organisations is also way out of sync. And we talk about it a lot. We need to shift and we need to do something about it. So, do we live in a humanitarian world? Well, in a world of growing crises, of which COVID is but one, those who are responsible for ensuring security and well-being of ordinary people like you and me are quite often actually working against the rights and what people deserve and need. However, despite those escalating challenges, the core principles, the moral rights and the community of humanitarianism mean that although there may not be enough support, what is there is getting better, and what we have a collective responsibility to do is to work together to ensure that those rights and the dignity and choice of those affected by crises is upheld. Which brings me on to you. And I assume you're here because you want to be part of this. So we'll have much more time to talk about it. But what would I suggest you may like to think about is being really clear about what you bring. We all have skills. Many of you will have the most extraordinary technical capacities, whether you're engineers, lawyers, nurses, managers, accountants, whatever you are. That is what you bring. Be clear about what you bring. Make sure that you adhere to your own principles and values. That profound belief in, for me, is in equity, equality, and the dignity and choice of people affected by crises. And we must never, ever lose sight of those. And then, just as a final tip, perhaps, seize those opportunities. If you're passionate about this, if you're committed to this, then there will be ways in which you can offer your assistance and your support. And I can tell you, it is one of the most extraordinary, moving and rewarding ways to spend your life. So I'm really looking forward to talking to you more about it this afternoon. But for now, thank you.
Jane, thank you so much for that incredibly insightful overview. My name's Sophie. I'm one of the careers consultants for the humanities faculty. And if you just bear with me, I will share my slides now and introduce the speakers one by one, just before we go into the breakout rooms. Okay, so first of all, Mubarak from Oxfam, would you like to give yourself an introduction, please?
Yes, Sophie. Let me start my video. Hello, everyone. This is Mubarak Ali. I studied at the Global Development Institute and graduated in 2017 with a master's in international development, specializing in politics, governance, and development policies. I currently work with Oxfam in Somalia. I am from Somalia. I have been working in Somaliland, Somalia, since I graduated from the University of Manchester. In the past, I have also worked with a lot of local, international NGOs, UN organizations, and have quite a number of years' expertise in this sector. It is an honor to be a part of this discussion, and I am sure we'll have more to say in the breakout rooms. But for now, I look forward to speaking with as many of you as possible, and I would be glad to share my experience and perspectives shortly. Thank you.
Thank you. And Shakira and Dan from the Halo Trust.
I can go first if you like. Yep. So my name is Dan Richards. I am a graduate of the Humanitarian and Conflict Response Institute at the University of Manchester. Stayed on at the law school to complete a master's in security and international law, which I finished last year, at the end of 2020. I currently work as a program officer for the Halo Trust in Angola. For those of you who don't know what the Halo Trust is, We deal with explosive remnants of war. Most people think of us as a mine clearance NGO, so landmines, anti-vehicle mines, improvised mines, but we also deal with weapons management, structures to store guns, weapons, unused explosives, and we also help local, national militaries and police forces to securely hold their stockpiles. I've only worked for the Halo Trust for 6 months, and I work as a program officer. I deal mainly with writing program reports, data collection, capacity building, and I'm currently, I apologize if my internet goes in and out. I'm currently at one of our small bases out in BA province in Angola. Over to you, Shakira.
Thanks, Dan. My name's Shakira. I'm also currently, my internet connection might cut out. I'm the program officer for the Halo Trust in Somaliland. I'm currently in Somalia, in Mogadishu, and the security here is quite tight. Before I joined Halo, I was trying to complete my master's degree at GDI, and I got snapped up just before I could finish my dissertation. And then prior to that, I was working for the Australian Red Cross for 4 years. And then prior to that, I was working in Australian state governments, a bit like the civil service in the UK. My current role is very similar to Dan. I focus on measuring the humanitarian impact of Halo's work, female empowerment. There's a lot of donor reporting, and I manage our community outreach and risk education teams. And I've been in the role almost 6 months now.
Wonderful, thank you both, Dan and Shakira. And now we have Hannah from Plan International UK.
Hi everyone, my name's Hannah Sheppard, and I graduated from the University of Manchester back in 2011. I did an International Development Masters focusing on social policy and social development. I work for Plan International UK. You may have heard of us. We're an international international children's rights charity focusing on equality and advancing girls' rights. We cover lots of things in the international development space, and quite recently some stuff in the UK because rights are global. I am the Senior Philanthropic Partnerships Officer at Plan. That means I manage our major donors. So I work within the fundraising capacity to bring in gifts from a minimum of £5,000 from individuals all the way up to £1 million plus. Yeah, that's me. Previous to that, I have worked for several other UK-based charities, including Marie Curie and the NSPCC in similar roles. But hopefully, why I'm on this call today is kind of show you alternative / other opportunities to work within international development organisations.
Fabulous, thank you, Hannah. And Rania, who is a humanitarian affairs and human rights specialist.
Hello everyone, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you, thank you.
Perfect, thank you very much for having me with you. It's an honor and a pleasure. My name is Rania Razi, so I'm a humanitarian and human rights professional, if the word exists. And I've been working since 2002 in various fields in humanitarian assistance. I'm Lebanese, so I started in Lebanon with national NGOs and then moved to an international career where I worked with Médecins Sans Frontières, with Amnesty International, with Oxfam, with several UN entities, agencies, UNICEF, UNDP, with the UN panel of experts on Sudan, with the Commission of Inquiry on Yemen, and presently I'm working as the Deputy Representative of the Office of the High Commissioner in Mauritania. So I'm hoping that we can discuss a bit for those who are interested in this leap of faith back and forth between human rights, humanitarian assistance, and how do our worlds meet, and everything that's been going on over this last tragic year. So I look forward to speaking to you. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And Mike Bird is here from Weigo.
Hi, folks. Yeah, I graduated in 1990 from Leeds University. Studied French and Portuguese, went to Brazil to practice Portuguese for a year, trained as a teacher, did a PGCE after graduating, and then went to work for 4 years in Malawi and then Mozambique for initially a small UK-based organization called Concern Universal, and then the American refugee agency called the International Rescue Committee. After that, worked briefly in Azerbaijan and did some fundraising for the West Yorkshire Red Cross before then going to Mongolia, worked for 3 years with Voluntary Service Overseas as their country director in Mongolia, and from there to Cambodia with Oxfam GB, and then from Oxfam GB to Oxfam New Zealand, working in their humanitarian section, and then worked for the New Zealand government for 4 years as a donor, running the NGO funding scheme for the New Zealand government, before in 2010 coming back to the UK. And I've been working since then with women in informal employment, globalizing and organizing, Weigo for short. We're a women's labor rights organization, but lucky for me, they let in a few men as well. And I run the administrative function of Weigo. Our only office in the world is in Manchester. And it's from there that we support a network of activists and researchers who are working to support organizations of informal workers around the world. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thank you for that, Mike. And now we have Jane Ham from Project Trust.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jane and I am Head of Volunteer and Skills Engagement at Project Trust. So Project Trust is an educational charity specialising in long-term volunteering for young people aged 17 to 25 years old. We've got projects across Africa, Asia and Latin America where volunteers are teaching, engaging in youth development and also outdoor education as well. My role at Project Trust is very much about engaging with schools and with youth organisations, building those relationships and maintaining those relationships, and supporting young people at the very start of their volunteer journey as well. Prior to working for Project Trust, I've been with Project Trust for 5 years now. I was a secondary school teacher and laterally worked in pupil support. So I was head of pupil support, very much supporting young people before they went into the world of work or into higher education as well. So really seeing the benefits and the value of taking a structured gap year.
Thank you very much, Jane. And Emma Richardson is here from University of Manchester Volunteering Service.
Hi there, yes, good afternoon. So my name's Emma, I work in the Volunteering and Community Engagement team. I might have met some of you already. My path to this job, I've graduated with a social sciences degree and went to work in the charity sector here in the UK. I worked in homelessness and youth work, and then decided to go travelling and did some volunteering abroad and spent some time in India and Malawi volunteering there. On return, I did a Master's in International Development with a focus on conflict, and worked for a few years with a conflict resolution charity here in the UK, focusing on youth and mediation. And during that time, spent some time with doing some training with Red R, a humanitarian training organisation, and then found the job here at Manchester University and didn't expect to still be here 10 years later. During that time, I did some volunteering with VSO, was allowed to have a year off, and went to do, spent a year in Ghana to volunteer as a community advocacy, in a community advocacy role with World Vision. And then when I returned from there, we as a university were at the very beginning of setting up our international volunteering programme. So now I'm in charge of that. We run international volunteering opportunities all over the world, and my aim is to make sure that they're ethical, sustainable and sound. And obviously I'm here today to champion volunteering and all the different ways that can help you with your future careers.
That's great, thank you, Emma. And then finally we have Dr. Stephanie Rinaldi, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thank you. Hi everyone. I work here at the university as well, actually, at the Humanitarian and Conflict Response Institute. I guess maybe some of you are students there, but my role isn't to do with our kind of teaching element at all. So we're a research institute, and the nature of HCRI is such that a lot of our research grants and such are with operational partners. So my job is really to work with those partners and deliver. So it's quite policy focused, often the type of research that we're doing. So for example, so my background's academic, I have a PhD in politics. My first degree is in development though, actually. And so I've done things like work, we're a World Health Organization collaborating centre. So we've done various things with them, including working with the NGO UK Med, who some of you might know, they're just down the corridor from us when we were in the office. Working with them to deliver training programs for international emergency medical teams who respond to disasters and such. And the main project that I'm working on now is called Researching the Impact of Attacks on Healthcare. So we're funded by UK Aid, and we work with MSF and ICRC and others to try and better document how conflict affects healthcare delivery, basically. But I could also around HCRI, so if you have questions about the teaching or anything at HCRI, I might be able to help with that too. I look forward to speaking to you. Thanks.